The static of a security monitor is the only pulse in a building that should be dead. When the clock strikes 3 a.m., the silence of a high-rise in downtown Miami ceases to be peaceful and begins to feel predatory. You are alone, yet the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes presses against your back. In the humid darkness of the Florida night, thousands of workers step into the void of the graveyard shift. They are the silent sentinels of gas stations, office complexes, and sprawling warehouses. For these individuals, the job description includes more than just vigilance. It requires a tolerance for the impossible. The year was 2022, at a logistics center near the edge of the Everglades, where the isolation is absolute. A lone night watchman, veteran of a decade, began to notice a sequence of anomalies that defied logic. It started with the scent of ozone and the rhythmic clicking of heavy industrial doors. Every door in the facility was magnetic, requiring an encrypted keycard for even the slightest movement. Yet, on the thermal feed, the heavy steel barrier to Sector 4 slid open with agonizing slowness. There was no heat signature detected, only the cold draft of the swamp filtering into the sterile hall. The night shift is a psychological threshold where the boundary between the physical and the spectral begins to erode. Scientific studies suggest that prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation can trigger mild hallucinations, but cameras do not hallucinate, and digital recorders do not imagine the sound of weeping. In a vacant office building in Jacksonville, an IT technician worked late to migrate servers during the quiet hours. The floor was entirely empty. The elevators locked down, and the motion sensor lights were extinguished. At 2:14 a.m., the lights at the far end of the corridor flickered into a blinding, steady glow. He watched from his glass enclosure as the sensors triggered one by one, tracing the path of something moving toward him. There was no footfall, only the mechanical hum of the building reacting to a presence it was programmed to detect. sat frozen, staring at the empty air behind the reinforced glass. Then came the telephone calls, a phenomenon reported by night clerks across the coastal panhandle. The internal lines would ring, displaying extensions from rooms that had been decommissioned for years. When unsweared, there is no voice, only the sound of labored, wet breathing that mimics the listener's own rhythm. One night auditor in a historic St. Augustine hotel recorded 30 seconds of such a call on his personal device. Forensic audio analysis later revealed a sub-frequency layer containing what sounded like a rhythmic chanting. The room the call originated from was a storage closet, bolted shut from the outside since the 1970s. The psychological toll of these encounters is often dismissed as fatigue or highway hypnosis by the corporations. Yet, the resignation rates for solo night shifts in certain Florida sectors remain disproportionately high. Men and women with years of experience walk away from high-paying roles, citing a pervasive sense of dread. In the outskirts of Orlando, a private security contractor monitored a construction site bordering a forgotten cemetery. He reported seeing a figure in a high-visibility vest standing perfectly still near the excavation pit. When he approached to challenge the trespasser, the figure vanished into the red clay earth. Subsequent review of the footage showed the contractor speaking to a void, gesturing at shadows that held no form. However, the mud on the ground told a different story, revealing a single set of bare footprints. They led from the center of the site to the edge of the woods and simply stopped. The phenomenon of the third man is often cited by those in high-stress, isolated environments during the night. It is the feeling of a helpful or watching presence that accompanies a person through a moment of crises. But for those in the dark corridors of the South, this presence rarely feels benevolent or helpful. It feels more like a territorial predator observing an intruder in its domain after the sun has retreated. The architecture of modern buildings seems to trap the echoes of the past, replaying them when the world is quiet. Hallways become arteries for memories that have no business existing in the present day. A night-shift janitor in a Tampa hospital reported the sound of a gurney being pushed down the hallway of the morgue. When he stepped out to assist, he found an ancient iron stretcher sitting in the middle of the corridor. It was a model that hadn't been used in the facility since the mid-century polio outbreaks. He attempted to push it back into the storage room, but the wheels refused to turn, as if a great weight sat upon it. He claimed the air around the stretcher turned frigid, turning his breath into a visible mist in the July heat. He left his keys on the floor and never returned to collect his final paycheck. There is a specific frequency of silence that only exists between the hours of 2 and 5 in the morning. It is a heavy, pressurized quiet that makes the sound of a falling paperclip seem like a gunshot. In this silence, the mind begins to interpret the hum of the HVAC system as distant, muffled whispering. But what happens when the whispering stops being an interpretation and starts calling your name? This was the experience of a late-night radio DJ in a small station located in the Florida Panhandle. Between tracks, he heard his own voice coming through his headphones, whispering things he had never said. The voice told him to look at the window of the broadcast booth, which faced a dark, empty parking lot. Standing under the lone, flickering streetlight was a silhouette that mirrored his own posture and clothing. When he wobbled, the figure mimicked him with a terrifying, jerky latency that felt inhuman. These stories are not merely campfire tales. They are documented in logs and police reports across the state. Officers responding to welfare checks often find employees in a state of catatonic shock, unable to explain their fear. They point to empty corners and darkened doorways, claiming that the shadows moved against the light. In a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale, security footage captured a stack of heavy wooden pallets, levitating 3 feet off the ground. They hung in the air for exactly 6 minutes before crashing down with enough force to shatter the concrete. The lone employee on duty was in the break room, unaware that the laws of physics had paused. When he viewed the footage later, he realized that a dark shape had been crouching atop the pallets as they rose. It was a mass of obsidian shadow that didn't reflect the infrared light of the security camera. It seemed to be looking directly into the lens, aware of the future viewer's gaze. The isolation of the night shift acts as a catalyst for the thinning of the veil between realities. Without the chaotic energy of the daytime crowd, the others feel empowered to manifest in the physical realm. They reclaim the spaces we occupy, reminding us that we are merely temporary tenants of the light. Many who work these hours develop rituals to protect their sanity and ensure their physical safety. They leave radios playing in empty rooms or keep every light in the building burning at maximum brightness. They avoid looking into mirrors or dark windows, fearing what might be standing directly behind them. The human brain is wired to fear the dark for a primitive, evolutionary reason that we often choose to ignore. We tell ourselves that there are no monsters, only shadows and overactive imaginations fueled by caffeine and exhaustion. But the evidence suggests that the monsters are simply waiting for the world to go quiet. Consider the case of the night dispatcher, who received a call from her own home phone while she was at work. She lived alone and had locked her doors, yet her caller ID clearly showed her personal residential number. When she answered, she heard the sound of her own front door creaking open and a soft hum. The police found her house perfectly sealed, with no signs of entry and no one inside the premises. Yet, the call logs on her home phone showed an outgoing call to the dispatch center at that exact time. To this day, she refuses to sleep in that house, claiming the hum still echoes in the walls. These incidents share a common thread of displacement, where the familiar becomes hostile and the safe becomes a trap. The buildings we built to house our commerce and industry become hollow shells in the deep of the night. They are no longer offices or stores. They are labyrinthine hunting grounds for the unexplained. If you find yourself working tonight, listen closely to the sounds of the structure around you. Do not assume the rhythmic thumping in the pipes is just air, or that the shadow in the corner is just a coat. Pay attention to the feeling of the hair rising on your neck when you enter a room. The Florida heat usually keeps the nights warm, but there are pockets of cold that shouldn't exist. If you walk through a sudden chill in a hallway, do not stop to investigate the source of the draft. Keep moving, keep your eyes forward, and do not acknowledge the presence that is following your steps. There are records of shadow people appearing in the periphery of vision for those working under fluorescent lights. They appear as fleeting glimpses of tall, thin figures that dart behind pillars and vending machines. They never make a sound, yet their presence causes a visceral reaction of terror in the observer. One night shift nurse in a decommissioned wing of a Miami hospital saw such a figure standing over a vacant bed. She described it as a void in the shape of a man, darker than the surrounding darkness of the unlit ward. It held a finger to its non-existent lips as if swearing her to a permanent, silent secrecy. The investigation into these events rarely yields physical evidence that a prosecutor could use in a court of law. We are left with grainy footage, corrupted audio files, and the shattered nerves of those who witnessed the impossible. The truth remains buried in the files of security firms and private internal memos. We must ask ourselves if the economy of the night is worth the psychological price paid by those on the front lines. Is the convenience of a 24-hour world worth the opening of doors that were meant to stay closed? Or are we inviting something into our civilization that we are not prepared to handle? As the sun begins to rise over the Atlantic, the shadows retreat, and the world returns to a state of normalcy. The workers finish their shifts, blinking in the harsh morning light, trying to convince themselves it was a dream. They go home to sleep, but their rest is often haunted by the gray static of the monitors. The transition from night to day is a relief, but the cycle is inevitable and will begin again in a few hours. The buildings will empty, the sun will set, and the third man will return to his post in the corridor. The silence will thicken once more, waiting for the next person to walk the halls alone. In the end, we are left with more questions than answers about the true nature of the graveyard shift. Is it a trick of the mind, a glitch in the fabric of reality, or something far more ancient and predatory? Perhaps it is all three, swirling together in the humid, dark air of the American South. Stay vigilant if you are among those who watch while the rest of the world sleeps in their beds. Do not ignore the feeling of being watched, for it is often the only warning you will ever receive. The dark has a memory, and it does not take kindly to those who disturb its peace. The reports continue to come in, from the Keys to the Panhandle, each more disturbing than the last. Each one a testament to the fact that we are never truly alone, even in the most isolated of places. The night shift is a journey into a different world, one where we are not the masters. Remember these stories the next time you see a lone light burning in a high-rise at 4 a.m. Behind that glass is a person who may be witnessing the collapse of their reality in real time. Pray for them and pray that the sun rises a little faster than it did the day before. What is your take on these nocturnal encounters? Have you ever experienced something inexplicable while working alone at night? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more dark archives, and leave a like if you respect the silence of the night.